What's going on, Sean?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing fine. We are live, and I'm coming at you with five. Welcome to another edition of Gavin Richard Presents on my channel, GBoo2786. Whoever you are, wherever you are, hope you're feeling blessed and doing well this evening. Uh, my brother and friend to the show, Shawn James, is on. Like
Yeah,
always, he's a guest here. We're grateful to have him. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing pretty good, my friend. This is just a there's a lot that has been going on, but this is just a random talk. That's what I titled it today, and there's just been a lot happening. Of course, we've talked about the Ahmaud Arbery thing, and more stuff is coming out about that. And I did see your video, and I want to tell you it was a pretty good video that you did, and how you did your analogy on it on that with Barack Obama and so forth. Uh, so I just want to compliment you.
Well, thank you. Wanted to be objective with that presentation.
Right. Well, have you heard the latest where I don't know if you know this, but it came out in the New York Post. I'll share that article with everyone that the sister of of Travis McMichael, daughter of Gregory McMichael, got a lot of flack for sharing a Snapchat video or picture rather, not video of the crime scene, particularly of Ahmaud Arbery's dead body. Are you aware of that, Sean?
I wasn't aware of that, but that gives me shades of Michael Brown when they give us pictures of that crime scene before we could digest the information, and that's not really good journalism as I see it.
Right. Well, I think this was her, Miss McMichael. I use the term Miss light loosely. Uh, Lindsay McMichael. She put it on her Snapchat, and somehow or another it went out in front of in the news, and people obviously complained about it. And it was just sickening that they would do that. But I think when we deal with white supremacists and racists, this is what we expect, where a black man is dehumanized.
Yes, what they look to do is discredit the victim of the crime so that they can make the perpetrators appear to be innocent. Now, these men are clearly in the wrong in the way they approach things. And what they want to do now is deflect by saying that there was something wrong with the young man. I forget what is his name again?
Ahmaud Arbery.
Ahmaud Arbery. And they want to say that he is someone he was guilty of his own demise, of the results of his own demise, and they want to say that his demise was his own fault. So what they want to do is they want to try to find some way to justify this murder, and there's no way they can justify it because really they just needed to step aside and let law enforcement do their job.
No doubt about that. And I think what I point out too, they're trying to point, and I believe we talked about this, they're trying to point to this defense of, well, it's not a defense, but a citizen's arrest statute, where when they catch someone in the act of a crime, that they have the duty to arrest them. And of course, it's also a stand your ground thing because they're going to say Ahmaud Arbery attacked them, even though my position of it is that, and legally speaking, that citizen's arrest statute does not apply in this case due to the fact that they did not witness by the whole 911 call. If you've heard, they never witnessed a crime take place. The 911 operator was even asking him, well, what is he doing? What is he doing? Well, he's just running right now. Well, running is not a crime. Uh, they also have the videotape of him going into it wasn't completed home. I think it was being refurnished or renovated, if I'm not mistaken, or under construction, whatever it was. He walked in there. The owner of and I'm shocked, the owner of the building of the home, he's actually been staying off code, basically saying that this young man didn't take anything in. He didn't commit any crime. He's not associated with the McMichaels. And then releasing more video of even a white couple going into that home who had nothing to do with Larry, and the homeowner's Larry English having nothing to do with it as well. So I'm really surprised that he's been releasing those, because usually we don't see those videos or know that until after, of course, a not guilty verdict or no charges rendered.
Yeah. Well, when I look at this whole case, I just see a lot of stuff that that really, it really makes me shake my head, because I'm looking at it and at this whole incident, and it's like they're talking about citizens arrest, but when you look at the criteria for a citizens arrest, it doesn't line up. And when you look at this guy's training, one of the father, I believe, he was supposed to have some training, and he wasn't certified in any training. So when I look at the whole situation, it looks like a plain old-fashioned lynching. And it looked like these two beta males, really, it's again, like I talked about, they wanted to pee and mark on their territory, and they wanted to send a message to the world that black men weren't invited into that area, and they wanted to do that through these terroristic tactics. So when I look at this situation, these guys don't really have a legal leg to stand on, because, again, a citizen's arrest does not require two men to approach another man with a weapon. And if this is a trespass situation, like most police officers, they know the procedure. They're not going to approach a suspect with a weapon. First, they're going to start asking questions of that individual, and they're going to, after they ask the questions, then let that individual know what they've done wrong, if they've done anything wrong, and they're going to deal with that in a professional manner. The way these individuals approach things, this was a terroristic tactic. This was all about, again, terrorizing Ahmaud Arbery. This is all about making this man scared. And this was all about sending a message to other black people that if you come into this area, you will be dealt with, and you will be dealt with severely. Because with these beta males, again, it's all about peeing and marking on their territory and sending a message to people. And this is the same type of terrorism that Ku Klux Klan participated in back during Jim Crow. So we really cannot give this type of behavior a pass, because if we give it a pass, all it does is encourage more of it. And this type of behavior, people just don't understand how it's a slippery slope when you have individuals like this, because they're not about enforcing the law. They're all about creating fiefdoms, the same way George Zimmerman created a fiefdom in his gated community, and then abusing that power and abusing the people in that community.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And then also, I don't know if you know this, the latest as well, is that supposedly Ahmaud Arbery was chased for 4 minutes prior to his death. So apparently that would even eliminate, to me, a manslaughter charge, because it seemed it was very premeditated for them to do this. Now, as a general rule, as an attorney, of course, I believe in the presumption of innocence, but that's just the standard that we have. But the bottom line is the video speaks for itself. And the nerve of this rowdy fella to just, I mean, he's trying to save face right now, because he knows his ass is in trouble, because he could be charged very well as an accessory to murder by recording that video. And he's mentioned all in the police report. So he had to have been, it had to have been hell of convenient and a hell of a coincidence that he just randomly recorded the video, not knowing what was going on.
Well, I always believe that they were recording the video to be a trophy, because if you're going to chase a man for 4 minutes, again, you could have just let law enforcement deal with this situation. They have vehicles, they have backup. They could have easily dealt with Ahmaud Arbery if they believed he was trespassing, and they would have handled it in a more professional manner.
Yes, yeah, right about that. Joni is in the chat room. Joni, hello. Thank you for joining. Please subscribe to the channel. By the way, I saw, Shawn, I started reading your, I'm going to get back to that, our conversation about Ahmaud, but I wanted to say this before I forgot. I started reading The Man Crisis. So I finished, I heard you paint houses already. So I'll be reading that all this week as soon as I can, since I got a little free time. But yeah, most definitely, it's getting back to Ahmaud Arbery. I certainly think that it also depends on what type of prosecutor we're going to have, because the female prosecutor that they have, her name escapes me. She's from Atlanta, and she's a black female prosecutor, but she is a Republican, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, the internet wins. There are receipts of her surrounded by white men and so forth in the courtroom. Does that mean that she's not going to be good? Not necessarily. And I know a lot of people were well, a couple of people I knew were happy that they got a black prosecutor, but I don't know if you recall. I remember the whole Botham John situation where we had Judge Tammy, the Mammy Kemp, who basically was hugging, this convicted murderer and giving her a Bible in court, which was huge ethical to me, was an ethical violation on her part as a judge, giving a, and not regardless of what you believe in God and so forth, which I do. I'm a Christian myself. I didn't believe that that was appropriate for her to do that at that time, and yet alone to hug a convicted murderer. And so people have fear of that. People have fear of Lee Merritt and Benjamin Crump being on the case. They always tell me, well, Gavin, they don't win anything. Do you have any thoughts about the attorneys that are representing these families?
Well, when it comes down to the black female prosecutor, I just see that as just more symbolism, because if we remember, we had a black attorney general, Eric Holder,
Yes.
and during the time of all of these black men being murdered by law enforcement and these terrorists like George Zimmerman, but they didn't really do anything. They were just window dressing. They just gave us a black face, and the black face just parroted what these people wanted said. So when I look at this black female prosecutor, it doesn't really make me believe that we're going to get any sort of justice, because we had Loretta Lynch as the attorney general during the time of the murder of Eric Garner, and she basically just ran the clock out on that case. And because she ran the clock out on that case, I really have no faith in just seeing a black face there. Yeah, you can be a black woman with a degree, you can be a black woman who's an attorney, but if you're not really serious about getting justice, it doesn't matter, because they'll just, oftentimes they will trot out one of these people with, and just put them out here, and they'll use them as window dressing and symbolism to pacify the black masses, so that they won't go out here and protest, or they won't go out here and start talking about economic sanctions by just walking away from mainstream businesses. So what they'll do is they bring out the black token as a pacifier, and that's all done to make people feel better in the short term. Meanwhile, in the long term, they're already rigging the game so that this guy or his son can get off. And really, that was done by the original prosecutors in the state case. They weren't even interested. I mean, we really want to talk about something, we need to talk about that cover up that went on with Ahmaud Arbery's case for the last 2 months, where they practically, the DA's office and
they passed the buck. They tried to cover that whole thing up. Yeah,
that's where the corruption really was, because they buried this case. And if they weren't so arrogant to believe that they could run this video, we wouldn't have known about it.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that video, forget leaking the video, the attorney who came out, Alan Tucker, saying he leaked it to the media. He didn't have to leak it to the media, because, well, I'm grateful that he did, and his explanation made absolutely no sense. But the police department had that video circulating. They had seen it because they mentioned it in the police report. Based off the video, we believe these men acted in self-defense. They actually say that shit. So it's a cover-up from the police on down. It was a cover-up from the district attorneys. Both of them, the Wade County Judicial District Attorney, George Barnhill, and the female district attorney of Glenn County. I believe, I can't think of her name right now. It escapes me. But both of them need to be disbarred. I've put that. Actually, I don't know why I even forgot the name. I have it right here. But this is the district attorney who's handling the case. This is a picture. Her name is District Attorney Joyette Holmes of Cobb County. Now, if you know anything about Georgia, anybody from Atlanta, my brother lived in Cobb County. And I already know what it was like. Now, I personally never had any trouble personally, but I knew Cobb County I saw a couple of Confederate flags out there. So that is, this is the district attorney who's handling the case. She's apparently a former judge. I don't know exactly how, the jury is still out on her, I guess we could say. So she might do a good job, and she might not be. But I don't get caught up in symbolism, as you pointed out, Shawn, because we know all too well that symbolism doesn't get results. Symbolism is great for our young children to look up and say, well, we had a black president or a black GA. But, other than that, we didn't get anything out of Barack Obama. And I've seen people actually get so upset when you criticize him because they still want to hold on to that. And it's mostly people from the civil rights era. And we've talked about the Congressional Black Caucus right now, early in the last, few videos that we spoke. And, I don't think anyone, of course, I don't think we have any black leadership anymore, especially that have taken a role in this. And I don't know if you consider Al Sharpton to be a great black leader, or of course Jesse Jackson is sick. What do you think of right now the state of black leadership?
Well, it's in a really bad shape. We really don't have any leaders in our black community. A lot of these leaders have been, as I see it, they've been compromised, and they aren't really about leading the community. They're all about serving themselves. I mean, a lot of our so-called black leaders are not looking out for the best interests of black people. They're just looking for a payday from either the left or the right at the expense of the black community. They're not representing black people. They're just pretending to represent black people. And with there being no real leadership, that's why the black community is in bad shape, because we don't have anybody looking to set a direction or a tone. And I believe that it's just time for us to walk away from these so-called black leaders and start setting our own direction and start setting our own course. Because when your leaders don't have your best interest, then it's time to stop following them and set a new course for yourself, because they're not representing your interests. They're not interested in providing you with tangibles towards building a better black community. And it's time for the black masses to walk away from these leaders, because they just want to get some crumbs off the table. They're not really interested in helping to improve the quality of life for brothers and sisters out there.
That is DA Jackie Johnson of Glenn County. That is her picture right there. Also, this is George Barnhill. Let me just pull that up. These are the ADAs, or the district attorneys, I should say, not ADAs. But these are the two prosecutors that did not want to bring charges in the Ahmaud Arbery shooting. So this is George Barnhill.
Yeah.
And already there are calls for his job by a lot of people. I have written a letter, and I think you've seen it, Shawn, to the Bar Association in Georgia, that guys be disciplined in some form or fashion, even if they need to be disbarred. Well, so be it. We certainly don't need them prosecuting cases when they try to cover up something like this. And maybe I'll be successful, maybe I won't. I think it's just worth a hell of a try to do it.
It's time for him to be removed, because what he did was criminal. That's a cover up.
Right.
And when you cover up, you are no longer effective as a district attorney. A district attorney's job is to bring cases to justice and present arguments to show why this individual did this. And they cannot come in with their subjective opinion. And when you see a district attorney siding with a former police officer, it shows that there is some corruption. They practically buried this case, and that right there shows me that there's clear corruption.
Yeah, most definitely. And this is not over with yet. A lot of people may be upset right now, but we've got more. There's more that's going to be coming out soon. And I'm looking right now on Google. They're saying that there are different video cameras of the shooting, different angles. So we may find out more what happened. But one thing we do know is Ahmaud Arbery is dead, and he didn't have a gun. And
that's true.
Yeah.
But the real case is dealing with that district attorney. I mean, he's where the real corruption is. They're not dealing with him.
Both district attorneys. Both
of them. I mean, if you're not dealing with the district attorney's office, you really have not done anything. I mean, these beta males are one part, but the real one is the district attorney's office, because there's a culture of corruption there that has to be completely rooted out. Because this district attorney's office, if they just buried a case like this, there's no telling what other criminal cases they're going to bury. And it reminds me a lot of what happened with what I read about Bull Connor and the Democrats back in the day, and how they buried a lot of criminal matters and how they embezzled a lot of money, and how there's a lot of corruption.
Yeah, most definitely. And speaking of which, when you mentioned Loretta Lynch, I was just thinking about that. There's a video right now that's been circulating that was on the Washington Post. And shout out to Phil Scott from the African Diaspora channel. He covered this. Apparently, a group of Black women from Sunny Houston to Angela Rye and a few other females, which I can't think of their names per se. Amanda Seals is one. I don't like her. But they were actually trying to persuade Joe Biden to pick a Democrat, a Black woman as his running mate. Now, I mention this because there was an article in the Daily Mail that the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmire, excuse me, is in talks about being Joe Biden's running mate. So we have Black women that are begging Joe Biden, who is responsible for this crime bill in 1994, or in large part, he co-sponsored it along with even Bernie Sanders. And then on top of that, we have sisters asking for Black women to be vice president now, and having not only a Black female vice president, but also a Black female Supreme Court justice. Have you seen, well, Shawn, let me ask you first, have you seen the video or heard of it?
I have not seen this video or heard of it.
Okay. It's on the Washington Post, and let's see if I can find it. But just your thoughts, just from hearing about it. You probably need to look at the video, I guess, before you make a commentary on it.
Yeah, but from the sounds of things, it sounds like what they're doing is trying to beg Joe Biden to put a Black woman as a vice presidential candidate, and that's coming from a position of weakness. And me knowing this country, I know that anybody who goes out here and puts a woman on their ticket, they've practically put a nail in their coffin. I mean, all we have to do is look at Mondale Ferraro in 1984 and see how that ended. Your McCain Palin, how that ended. I mean, a woman America is just not interested in voting for Hillary Clinton, who just was a complete disaster. And anybody who knows the demographics of America knows that it is majority female. And anybody who knows the demographics of the 2016 election knows over 60% of white women voted for Donald Trump. And that shows us that women have no interest in electing a president who is going to go out here and have a woman on his ticket, because most women in American society, they get most of their needs met by men. So they have no real interest in electing any candidate who has a woman as a vice president, and many women just don't like other women. So if you understand female nature, most women don't like other women. Most women get jealous of other women. And when a woman sees another woman having power over her, that makes her resist that candidate. So the whole idea of Joe Biden even considering a woman, it may sound offensive to some people, but that's just not going to get him elected. All it's going to do is alienate his core base of white women who already were turned off by the whole idea of Hillary Clinton running for president. And it's going to further turn off those same women who, again, walked away from Walter Mondale in 84, walked away from John McCain in 2008, and walked away from Hillary Clinton in 2016. So they're not really connecting the dots on the pattern as related to the female demographic, because when you connect the dots as related to America's women, they have no interest in voting for a candidate. Now, these guys want to try to appear progressive, but the clear thing is America wants a president who has a male vice president, because that makes them feel secure, and it makes women feel secure when a man is taking the lead and taking charge. That's one of the things that the left underestimated about Donald Trump was that even though he was, as I see it, a grossly incompetent and grossly unqualified individual, he still won over because he was that rich white male, and he presented that image of masculinity, and that's the thing that appealed to America's women, who are the majority of voters. And this is the big mistake that America made, was thinking that they could just take that female vote for granted.
Yes, well, the other part of that too is I think after 8 years of Barack Obama, people were really tired of the pro-left agenda that he had been pushing, but also, and on top of that, I think they were frustrated with seeing a black man in the White House.
I think that's part of it, but the whole thing is he promised hope and change to a lot of people, and those people didn't see hope and change, and then he treated black people with such contempt that they just stayed home. So he tried to bring in this far left group with all of the homosexuals. He tried to pander to Hispanics, and he tried to push far left policies, and that further alienated people. So he gave people no incentive to go to the polls.
Go to the polls, yeah.
And what he did was he took the base for granted. I mean, he really took the base for granted, and Hillary was trying to run on the legacy of a man who had taken the base for granted, and nobody really assessed the long-term damage that Barack Obama did to the Democratic Party. People still don't understand the damage he did to the Democratic Party and its base, because he went with these far left people instead of trying to keep the party centered, and he really did not take care of the constituencies that are a core base to the platform. I mean, had he dealt, as I said, with George Zimmerman, he could have cut Donald Trump off at the knees, and had he dealt with a lot of these cases with black men, he would have still been able to secure the black vote. But he took the black vote for granted. He took white women for granted, and he just did not do a good job of being a steward over the party. I mean, the president is not only the executive branch of the White House, but he is also the steward over the entire political party and the vision and direction of it for the next 4 to 8 years. So the next candidate has to go and work building on their policies, and he gave nobody anything really to work on. I mean, he really went out here and pandered to a lot of people, like these voting blocks that weren't really voting blocks. Illegal immigrants aren't a voting block because they can't vote. And he went for the alphabet people, who were less than 1% of the population. Yes, that looks good on paper, but you have to go for the larger voting blocks if you hope to win. And he didn't do that.
Well, I think that he was, like, again, he's pushing a far left agenda. And I believe Obama was the Trojan horse to usher many of those things in. Keep in mind, we're coming in after George Bush Jr., George W. Bush, who was a complete disaster, and a grossly fucking incompetent. And I have no, I'm gonna get started on it because I'm from New Orleans and what happened with Katrina. So George W. Bush, holds a special place in my heart, but for all the wrong reasons.
He was also incompetent. I'll say that.
Yeah, he was grossly incompetent. Is a compliment to him. It's a gross understatement. But getting back to what we were saying, I thought that Obama really just was there to push. He looked out for the LGBT community. He looked out for immigrants. He even looked out for Native Americans. They were granted reparations. Jews were even fought for reparations because you had these American insurance companies or different Fortune 500 companies that participated in some shape or form with the Nazi Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust in Nazi Germany, excuse me. So I saw all of that, but then when it came to reparations for blacks, Barack Obama was against that. He was against affirmative action. He was opposed to apologies for slavery. So you factor all of that in, and you're a black man in America with 2 black daughters and a black woman. And now we're getting, this anti-male backlash in the media and the press. Now, and and, of course, I want to show this video because I have the video up. But Stacey Abrams, who ran for Georgia governor, who I didn't think too highly of, she's even been begging Joe Biden to become vice president. So let me just play this video, Sean, and
Okay.
see, and we'll get what everybody says. Let me know if you can hear it too.
You owe us. Black women are miracle workers.
We have been saving the Democratic Party
Can y'all hear?
since 1965.
2020 is no different.
Your only path to victory is through Black women. The voters who need to turn out, we know how to mobilize them. Our votes must not be taken for granted.
The following commitments will begin to show Black voters that you are serious about us.
America needs a Black woman vice president.
Candidates like Amy Klobuchar will not energize us. America needs a Black woman Supreme Court justice.
Remember Anita Hill? We do.
America needs more in a comprehensive Black agenda.
The rules are rigged against our communities.
Whether we are talking about a Black person who died of COVID-19 because of the lack of access to healthcare, or Ahmaud Arbery being killed by vigilantes,
or Breonna Taylor, an EMT killed by police while laying in her bed. We deserve solutions that address systemic racism, economic injustice, and domestic terrorism.
Joe Biden, you enacted drug and crime laws that harmed the Black community for generations.
Every major crime bill since 1976, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill.
You say you know better now. Show us you're serious by doing better.
This country has a problem.
police officers and vigilantes are killing us, and our quality of life must improve. Joe Biden, this must be addressed.
You must address our oppression, and most importantly, embrace our power to win the White House.
Vice President Biden, your campaign's mission is to restore the soul of America.
There is no restoration without us.
Okay, I guess that's the end of it. Now, notice they don't mention anything about Black men in the video. Notice also you have someone, let me stop this here. You have Amanda Seales. Amanda Seales, of course, is, to me, she's always been anti-male, anti-heterosexual, anti-Black males. A good group of those women. Angela Rye, I've had issues with because I know people I've never met. Now, I've never met all of these women, but I have heard stories about Angela Rye from a friend who met her, and it wasn't a good story, obviously, just from what she did. But I noticed the first thing you notice, they don't talk about any brothers in the program other than Ahmaud Arbery's shooting. And you're talking about going to Joe Biden, begging him to give you a Black female candidate for vice president or Black female Supreme Court justice. And the only thing I can think Joe Biden would do is blow a raspberry, because we don't negotiate at the table with our votes. We don't seek anything in return. And the only thing we try to get in return when we vote is fear. We don't want the next candidate. We don't want Donald Trump for another 4 years. Oh, God, no. And we've always been made to fear that. Fear the Republican. Not that I endorse Republicans at all. Not that I endorse Donald Trump. But I just noticed that has always been a trend in the Black community, and especially with the elections, around election time, when they play the, I don't know how it is up there in New York, Sean, but here when they have elections coming up, and they'll go to the local R&B station, and we'll hear a Willie Horton style campaign with this brother who will talk about, this candidate he's going to bring back slavery, slavery or something along that nature. Not necessarily slavery, but this candidate, he was a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. He was a member of this and that, and you do nothing. Vote for the Democratic candidate ticket on November 24th, whatever day it is. So we hear stuff like that. I'm sure, is it like that in New York with the ads?
It's something like that, but I'm going to address this whole video. I mean, this whole video, it was
I want to address it.
It just showed just the complete weakness of these black women and how they are coming from the position of emotion. I mean, you're begging a candidate to give you a black female vice president. That is coming from a position of weakness. You don't beg a political candidate, you demand from a political candidate.
Right.
And when it comes down to the political candidate, they're supposed to take your demands and they're supposed to bring you tangibles. You don't sit there and say, please, Mr. Joe Biden, we pick a black female candidate. I mean, this when I listened to that, it just made me cringe, because it's clear to me these so-called educated professional women didn't know anything about politics, and they know nothing about leadership. I mean, they really are, you're begging this man. And again, when he listens to you coming from that position of weakness, he does not respect you, and he can do like Hillary Clinton did and take the black female vote for granted, because he knows he has that vote in the bag, because these black women are not demanding any tangibles in return for their vote. When it comes down to those black women, they were saying, oh, we're a voting bloc, but as a voting bloc, you're not using your leverage to gain any sort of tangible outside of some symbolic jobs like a Supreme Court justice, which Barack Obama could have gave us 8 years ago, or a female vice president, which again, Hillary Clinton could have gave us in 2016. So you're asking for things, and those things are symbolic. I mean, having a black female vice president means nothing if you look at Loretta Lynch's record on Eric Garner. I mean, yes, we had a black female attorney general, but that black female attorney general, all she was a woman with black skin, but she was still supporting the same white supremacist policy. Same thing could be said for your Clarence Thomas, who is another black man in office, but really didn't serve anybody. So
it's an embarrassment.
Having a person with the skin tone doesn't mean anything. It is all about their vision for the country and the policies they support. So having a black female vice president, that really doesn't do anything for me. I mean, I want to hear what your positions are on all of these black men being murdered by the police and these beta males out here. And what is your plan to deal with these murders and practical lynchings like that of Ahmaud Arbery? And what is your plan to deal with this? Because if your plan is to do what Barack Obama did, which was absolutely nothing during his 8 years in office, then we don't need another black female vice president who does nothing. And that serves no purpose at all. And also to reinforce one of my points is you have the whole idea of going for black women. And it's a lot like the going after the black pastor. You know, your black pastor, he panders to the black woman on her emotions. And he knows that many black women are very gullible because they're emotional and they get caught up in the flash of things. And because they get caught up in the flash of things, they support candidates based on them presenting an argument saying, oh, I'm not Donald Trump, not understanding that there's no substance to that argument when you deconstruct it. And you say to yourself, telling me you're Donald Trump is not an argument. Telling me that Donald Trump is a racist is not an argument when the biggest racist of all, Lyndon Johnson, signed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And also, as he was passively signing those civil rights acts into law, he was disproportionately sending black boys to die in the Vietnam jungle and destroying the black family with the welfare state. So telling me you're not Donald Trump is not enough of an argument to get me to vote for you. What I want to hear is what tangibles you're going to bring back to black communities. Because again, another black face in a job, yeah, that would be nice in the 1980s. Nice symbolism, but in 2020, I don't want to hear about the first black female vice president, who's going to be like the first black male vice president who did nothing. I want to hear what tangibles you're going to bring to the table for me, because to tell me you're not Donald Trump is not an argument for running this country. Your argument for running this country in case Joe Biden winds up dead is, what are you going to do for black America? And do you have a plan to put black America first?
Yeah, oh, totally. I agree with that. And, you know, I'm not 100% sold even on Joe Biden. He has not really demonstrated, even if he is even competent to even be president, because I don't know if you've noticed, I've seen some promos where, you know, he's slipping or he's talking about something else in the middle of a speech. And, you know, he's up there in age as well. Just as Donald Trump is in his late 70s, Joe Biden is in his late 70s. So, and being a president of the United States, that's a very stressful, I can imagine that's a highly stressful job to have, per se. And the word is tangibles. And unfortunately, we've been made, ever since we've been given the right to vote, we've gotten it mixed up. The right to vote, and I'll say this, and I'm bold enough, and this is going to piss some people off. Voting has not solved anything for black people in America at all. Now, saying that, I'm not saying that voting isn't an important factor or tool that we have. Yes, it is. But is it the salvation of black America as everyone makes it out to be every year? No. And here's why. It's true you're more impacted by things locally and statewide. And on that regard, yeah, you should vote. Absolutely. You know, when you're talking about city ordinances that are going to be passed, who's going to be the next deputy, who's going to be the next coroner, the sheriff, things of that nature, even a district attorney, which is highly important because we need district attorneys that are actually going to seek justice the way that it needs to be meted out to the people. A district attorney represents the county and represents the people in that district. And clearly, we don't need the district attorneys like we see in the Ahmaud Arbery case. And we also need judges like Alu Stevens, who recently, and I wanted to talk about Breonna Taylor in a little bit, where he let this brother out from all the facts and circumstances that are coming in. He fired in self-defense when the police barged in at their own house and just opened fire and killed Breonna Taylor. Now, all of this allegedly just because it hasn't been meted out yet, but he's the one that's on trial, not the 3 police officers, although there's a lawsuit. And I know Benjamin Crump is involved in that one as well. What I'm saying with voting is that I think we have looked at it in the wrong direction because we saw from the 1960s about Dr. King and Medgar Evers and all of the other leaders that fought for the right to have the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, fought for blacks for the right to vote. We had the right to vote even through the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. But of course, though that amendment was not enforced, which is why they had to have a Voting Rights Act. But the main power behind the vote, really in truthfulness, is the economic power. That is really the number one thing that every ethnic group that I can think of, from the Arab community, from the Asians, let's look at the Asian community. They have the lowest voter turnout, yet they have one of the highest wealth among a group. And most of the time they set up their businesses in our communities where they make all of their money. And I don't care if you're talking about a liquor store or a wing shack or whatever. restaurant, whatever you have, gas stations, and this is Arabs included, and they give back to their families, to their children. Now, that's something that we don't tend to do because we're worried about partying for the next night and the next week, and we spend it so quickly. We're the biggest spenders of consumer-based products, billions of dollars. Look at the hair industry. We don't control that. They do. They control that. I saw a video online a couple years ago where these black women were being assaulted by these Asian store owners in, I believe it was in Oklahoma. The black men were protesting. All the Asian store owner had to do was cut off prices, and then you had a line all the way around the building of black women, and they were upset at the protesters, the male protesters, for protesting that. But we don't control those products. And every year we're focusing on, well, we got to get ready to go to vote. No, but what are you talking about? Maybe it's time to try something different. I'm not saying don't vote, but it shouldn't be the only solution.
That's true. Voting shouldn't be the solution. The problem is most Black Americans don't know how to vote, and they don't understand how economic power leads to political power. Now, the big problem is Black people have been voting on this civil rights style approach, and they think they have to vote down this ticket of the left. So they think that the left, because they signed the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, they have their best interests at heart. When in actuality, when you go to vote, you're not going to vote because you have gratitude for one political party. You're supposed to go to vote because you want tangibles from your politicians. It's not about what they're going to bestow upon you. It's about what you demand of them. I mean, they are supposed to be servants of the people, and they are supposed to represent those people they are serving. The problem with most Black voters is they come in thinking that the politician is just somebody who is just there to be there like an employee, but they don't understand that employee works for you. And you were supposed to make demands of that individual, and you were supposed to tell them what tangibles you want to come from Washington in the form of earmarks, in the form of government programs, in the form of government jobs. They are supposed to bring you tangibles at the end of the day. But most Black people over the last 40, 50 years, they believe that all they're supposed to get is the whole face of a symbolic Black candidate representing them, not a candidate who is accountable for delivering tangibles. So we have to change our way of thinking as related to voting and who we're voting for, what policies they are supposed to represent, because they're supposed to represent the policies we tell them. They're not supposed to tell us.
And those deals are decided, not to cut you off, but I have to just making this point. Those deals are actually decided on the golf course.
Yeah.
They make and cut deals with all of these, when you talk about lobbying and so forth, they make those decisions already, and they are backing that politician. So, things are tied to that.
And it shouldn't be. I mean, they are not supposed to be on the golf course. They're supposed to be talking to us. And the other problem with the voting and our approach is we don't connect economic power with political power. The problem with Black people is we don't really understand our value to the overall American economy. Now, Black people have $3.3 trillion in economic power, and then $1.1 trillion in cash and $2.2 in credit. And that number is growing, but we don't understand the value of our economic power. We don't understand that our economic power can be used to gain political power. Now, the Asians use our economic power to build their political base. The Hispanics use our economic power to build their political base. The Arabs are using our economic power to build their political base. But we don't use that power because we are caught up in a lot of symbolism and being the first Black so-and-so to represent something. I mean, that's symbolism. What good is the first Black so-and-so, like Barack Obama, if he's just not representing our interest and bringing tangibles to us? I mean, that was one of the hard lessons people didn't get from 2008 to 2016 with Barack Obama was, yes, you had a Black president, but he brought no tangibles to anyone. He didn't support a Black agenda. And black people.
And no black Supreme Court justice either in his picks. They were all either feminist or gay.
Yeah. So he had no interest. He was not focused on our interests. So we had people like Oprah Winfrey endorsing Barack Obama, but this man brought nothing to the table for black people. In fact, he expressed contempt for black people. So that's one of the things that black people really need to think about. If your candidates are so called arrogant enough to take you for granted that they don't have respect for you, then why should you vote for them? Because again, these people are applying for a job to represent you. And if you don't respect the population that you're representing, then they have no reason to go out here and vote for you. So that's something black people really need to think about as in terms of voting. And that's why we need to change our approach to voting, because it's not about what these people out here are representing. It's about them doing for us and meeting our demands, because we, the people, are the one who put them on the job, and their job is to take care of us by providing tangibles from the taxes we pay for and bring those taxes back to us in the form of economic resources like earmarks, government programs, government jobs, and policies that allow for the enrichment and the further building of a black economy and improving the quality of life in a black community.
Right. And a little caveat to that, when you had the first black mayors in these different cities, like say, for instance, in Atlanta, it was Maynard Jackson. Those men Maynard Jackson went to work. It was great symbolism, but he also brought substance to the Atlanta area when he revitalized that airport and made sure 80% of those contracts for revitalization went to African-American contractors to work on. Dutch Morial was the first black mayor here in New Orleans. You know, he actually put his foot down. He actually canceled Mardi Gras once when they had a police union strike in 1980. That was, I wasn't even born then, but they told me that was highly unpopular because white folks did not like that, that he did that. So, and same thing with, I can't think of too many more mayors, but that's just an example. Back then in the 70s, this is in the 70s, that those men actually had more guts and had more cojones than our leaders today. And it was great to vote. And yes, we voted for them, but they gave something in return. Today, we can't get that. And I think it's, they have gotten lazy. I think it's just that they're standing there and they're getting benefits from being 8-term senator or 8-term congressman. It's a career for them. And so they don't have to do anything else. And once you're in Congress, you get free health insurance for the rest of your life. Your family, I think, gets covered as well. So that's primarily what we're dealing with, and it's hurting us. And we should also look at, Shawn, and I'm glad we're on this platform. I've said before, what about establishing Black-owned media? Where is that today as far as a new BT that came out in 1980, or even a TV One? I don't think, and TV One has been around for a little while, but I don't think TV One has made a huge impact like talking about it. If you give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, when it comes down to black media, we don't really have any. The new black media is making inroads. I mean, if it wasn't, it's like Professor Black Truth and the Superboy, the Advice Show, we wouldn't really have the complete change in perspective. I mean, they have really changed how we saw the black vote. Even David Carroll changed the way we saw the black vote, because we had black people who were just thinking we have to keep voting down this ticket. But now we have people really rethinking that, thanks to these black YouTubers who have come out and really called out a lot of these politicians on their policies. And the old black media, they were, again, part of that whole symbolism. We own a TV network, but the whole thing is there's no content of substance to get black people thinking about how this media affects people, because media is programming, and the whole point of programming is to give you a set of instructions or a model to follow. And our model has been consumerism, having fun, or just talking around certain political subjects, but not really delving deep. And YouTube has really opened the door for a lot of more heavier subject matter and serious discussions about Black politics. And that's one of the good things to come out of YouTube is that and social media, is that Black people are really starting, to rethink their whole approach to politics. They're no longer taking candidates for granted, and they're no longer taking their place in America for granted. So we are getting an education with new Black media that we didn't get from old Black media, and it's starting to have an impact. And now these guys are really starting to feel it.
Yes, most definitely. Speaking of media, I wanted to ask you this because you've been a screenwriter, and I guess this was circulating. People have talked about this before the Obergefell decision. I was just curious because we've talked about this before. Like, do you think, as a screenwriter and in your dealings, has there ever been, to your knowledge, a push as far as a homosexual agenda in media or in Hollywood?
I can see that all around. I've seen it for 10 years and I've written about it. I wrote a whole article on it called Black Men in Dresses, Entertainment or Emasculation. And there has been an agenda to homosexualize and effeminize the image of Black men. And this is all done through social engineering. As long as you keep seeing these celebrities wearing dresses or dressed up in feminine ways, this is about socially engineering the mind of the next generation to correlate Black masculinity with homosexuality, Black masculinity with being effeminate, and to correlate Black masculinity with being a homosexual, effeminized image, so that the boys, when they grow up, they don't see an image of a Black man as the equal of a white man. They grow up seeing a Black man in this submissive, weak position under masculine Black women and under masculine Black men. So there's an agenda that's been going on for the last, I say, not even 10 years. I noticed it in 2010, but it's been going on for the last 20, 30 years. And the whole thing is it's about brainwashing the next generation so they can buy into this. And now that's being ramped up with the implementation of guys like Lil Nas X and many of these other individuals, Billy Porter. And again, I noticed that it's interesting that every movie you have out there, next to most of them, have no heterosexual Black men in them. I mean, oftentimes they find a way to either effeminize the Black man, minimize the Black man, or they find a way to make him a homosexual, but they never make the white male characters homosexual. So there's clearly an agenda as related to the Black male image. And that's something Black men have to start pushing back on, because this is our image and we have to start making efforts to take control of it. One of the things I try to do with books like the John Hayes series is give you those images of masculine heterosexual Black men so you can see a balanced image of a Black man and see that Black man in his natural leadership role. Because the type of media we have out here, that's very toxic for young Black boys to watch. And it's important for publishers out here to go out here and give people positive images of Black men, because they're not going to get it from mainstream media. Either they're going to give us an emasculated beta male, an effeminate Black male, or a homosexual Black male. So the only way we can get heterosexual Black male images is from Black-owned Black media, like what I do with the John Hayes series. I'm gonna leave a link to that in the chat. So those type of books, they really help you as you're growing up. And I've had readers tell me that they help their kids because we need that type of media.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about politics too, and since we're talking about the homosexual, the agenda, I look at, and one thing I can admire is that this group has actually gotten more rights in less than 40 years, probably less than that. They got it in 8 years with, under President Obama, and the way that they use the media and press. And this is just the LGBT lobbyists that I've seen shutting down even conservative organizations, Christian groups that have been shut down as a result of it. I know for a fact when they made the Obergefell decision legal here in Louisiana, there had issues because Catholic adoption agencies were actually forced, some of them, I believe they had been forced to close because in good faith, even though they work with the state, and the states can't discriminate, but the Catholic Church, of course, or, we believe in God, and, God says marriage is a man and woman. And this wasn't just in Louisiana, this was across the country. They had to close. And they certainly had a media campaign that had been pushed. So, we can actually learn. I'm saying all of this to say that we could actually learn from it, because you see how they made these politicians do what they wanted to do what they told them to do. And of course, the other benefit of it is most of the LGBTQ community is white, are white males.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of money. Buck, for instance, Ed Buck is, and we don't hear anything about him lately. Have you heard anything about Ed Buck recently? About the two black men that killed from an overdose at his house?
No, I haven't heard anything because they buried it.
They buried it. Yeah.
A lot of these homosexuals in Hollywood, they're in the closet, and they have a lot of money, so they can go out here and pay to have things presented or pay to have things buried. And they have a lot of money, but the whole thing is, when I look at things like the Get Woke, Go Broke, it shows that even money can only go but so far. Now, they have control over Hollywood, and they have control over certain political aspects, but when the masses start hearing about their agenda, that's when they receive the pushback, because their agenda, people don't want to support it.
Well, in truthfulness, I don't think people want to support it, but they're just being forced to, because they know if you speak out against it, you'll lose your job. The Miami Dolphins player, I think his name was Donaldson. I can't think of his name. He was a safety a few years ago when Michael Sam got drafted, and they showed Michael Sam and his boyfriend kissing each other and throwing cake at one another. And he commented on Twitter like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this," or "That's disgusting." And they suspended him from the team, and he had to actually go into sensitivity training. I know people who had spoken out against Bruce Jenner or Caitlyn Jenner and have gotten in trouble. So it's like, Bill Maher even said this, and Bill Maher, of course, is he's pro LGBTQ, very left-leaning comedian. He said, "Beware the gay mafia," when he was on Real Time with Bill Maher. And of course, Bill Maher also, he's been accused of being a scumbag and saying racial shit. I used to watch his show. I got out of it a little bit. I don't know about you, the Real Time show.
I believe that they have influence in their circles, but I believe if the mainstream public were to find out about them trying to manipulate people, they would really push back. I mean, every time they try to push an agenda, and I noticed this even in the days of the Drew Carey show and Ellen, when they try to push mainstream, and even in the case of Marvel Comics, that's when they meet with hard resistance. Now, they can try to bully people, but if they try to push too hard, they're going to get the huge pushback. And that's when they're going to see that you only being 1% of the population, you don't get to control people and the impact overall. I mean, I can see it with many of the comic books that they try to push. They try to push their gay agenda, and what happens is those books just don't sell because people just don't support that alphabet thing. I mean, they have their mafia, they have their control over certain industries and even certain politicians, but eventually when they try to go out and push mainstream, that's when they wind up getting huge resistance, because you can only call somebody a homophobe but so much because some of the stuff that you want to push, it starts to become absolutely, in many people's eyes, completely
too much,
and it becomes really excessive, and that's when they meet with the hard resistance. And that's why things like the slogan "Get Woke, Go Broke" leads to a lot of these projects that they push winding up dying or winding up. But I saw it dying when the Ellen came out back in the 90s. I remember when Ellen came out, and then after she came out, her show just collapsed. I mean, the ratings. The same thing with Drew Carey. He was doing a lot of gay things. He did a gay wedding on his show way before it was even gay marriage was even considered, but his show dropped like a rock. And people just don't want to watch this type of stuff. They don't want to see it in much of their mainstream media. I mean, most of America is still conservative and heterosexual. I may offend a lot of people to hear that, but most Americans, they don't want to see this stuff. They're not interested in it. And no matter how much you try to push these agendas, if the people aren't with them, you can't get any support.
No. And, to say that too, there was a Jewish school. I saw an article. This Jewish school stated, because in different states, they're forcing a curriculum now. It's a law, like in Illinois, where they have to teach gay history. This Jewish school said, we ain't never teaching nothing like that. Like they put their foot down.
And I have that critical question. You're going to make the Muslims do that?
No.
They're not. So if they're not going to make Muslims do it, then we have a right to push back too.
Yeah, and since you said that too, even when you look at the Fortune 500 companies, remember when North Carolina had that bathroom bill, and all of these Fortune 500 companies like Coca-Cola and PayPal were promising not to ever perform there unless they changed that law. Well, they pushed back because Coca-Cola, PayPal, and a few other businesses do business in Saudi Arabia and over in the Middle East, where homosexuality is punishable by death. They will actually throw people off the building if they celebrate that, or if they come out of the closet, they'll kill people for that. And they didn't protest that. So they called them out for being hypocritical. And, of course, I don't encourage violence on anyone, but, people have a right. If they don't want to see this, I don't want to see it. That's why Empire is going out of business now, and it's closing up, because I remember when the first episode, Lee Daniels had stated that he was going to blow the lid off homophobia in the Black community. And, not within the first 10 minutes of the show, you had Jussie Smollett and another white man, in bed or whatever. I hate describing it, but it was so bad that they even reported that the ratings started to drop once that, came on. So that's doubles down on what you're saying about people pushing back, not seeing that. Another thing too, very interesting, and I know I can go on for long rambling, brother, but I'll be finished in a second. Billy Crystal, great comedian. Billy Crystal, of course, if you remember, he played his first TV series was Soap, and he played the first openly gay character in a TV series. Well, he even came out and said that a lot of the stuff that the homosexual community is pushing was too far, and they got on him, forcing him to, eventually recant and so forth. So it is clearly people don't like to, when you push back, a lot of people feel that something bad is going to happen to them. And certainly there is a lot of pushback on it, but they can bully you and they can tell you, we don't like this, we don't like that, and this is how it's going to be. But everybody is entitled to the freedom of speech. Everyone's entitled to freedom of religion and expression. So what, you're going to agree to disagree?
Yeah, you could do that, but from what I've learned is that sometimes you have to hold your ground. I mean, about a year ago, I was dealing with a situation with this whole passport situation where these Black men were upset because I went against the false narrative talking about Black men going overseas to get relationships with foreign women and that it would be better than Black women. And I met with a lot of resistance. I met with a lot of hostility. I mean, people didn't want to donate to my videos and my channel. Then my Patreon went down 50%. I was dealing with personal attacks, but I knew I did the right thing because this was about helping Black men understand that you going overseas is not going to change anything if you're the problem, because the foundation of it is you being the problem. And with this whole gay community, we have to have people who stand their ground and stand their position, because the more you stand, the more people are going to want to stand with you, because the whole thing is this alphabet mafia. They want to try to bully people and control people, but they don't have the power like they think they have. And if more people came out and said, look, I have a right in America to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and if this is my opinion, I'm not being homophobic in expressing my freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I'm just saying that this is something I support. And that's not you being a homophobe. That's you saying, look, this, if you're a Christian, this goes against what is presented in the Bible. And if you are somebody who just is a heterosexual person, you're saying, look, you can have your life, you can go do what you want, but you're not going to tell me how to live, and you're not going to tell me that because I disagree with your position that I'm an ist or a phobe. I mean, there are certain things that are facts. I mean, the alphabet people are 1%.
To me, that's an oxymoron too, the term homophobe, because a phobia I'm sorry I'm cutting you off, but phobia means fear. You know, I don't fear anybody. You just don't agree with their actions.
Yeah. And when I look at the demographics, there's just not enough of the alphabet community to be a demographic that anybody could consider. Now, Hollywood wants to make them a major group, but Black community is 13 to 20% of the population. Hispanics are 14 to 20% of the population. They are demographics with millions of people. Even Asians are a demographic with millions of people. When you look at the alphabet group, the numbers just aren't there for whatever they're trying to push. And people look at them if you look at them from a business perspective, like I have, and I say 1% of 300 million people, that's 3 million people. That's not even enough people to really do anything as related to TV ratings, as related to box office. I mean, you're asking to create media for a population that's so small that you would not get any return on the investment if you looked at it from a business perspective. I mean, you have a population of 300 million people. You're making these politically correct points, but that's not going to put any money in anybody's pocket.
Right. Before we wrap, Shawn, I did want to ask you just a couple more things. I mentioned Breonna Taylor, and I should have, of course, we were going on different topics. This is random night. But just quickly, do you have a thought about Breonna Taylor and her shooting?
I haven't heard much about the case, but it was a clear case of self-defense from what I have heard. And you know, she was defending her property. He was defending.
But she was asleep. She was asleep.
But the whole thing is they busted into her door. And that's why I'm not a fan of these no-knock raids from these police regarding these so-called drug cases and stuff like that. Because a lot of this information that these detectives get, is primarily from junkies. And a lot of these junkies, from what I've seen here in the South Bronx, they will lie just to get money. And because they do get paid for this information. And this is what leads to people being terrorized, because when these junkies wind up desperate for a hit, they will tell a lie that, oh, there's something here, there's something there, and there's nothing there. All they want to do is get that money to go get that rock or go get that weed, and the judge will sign off on the warrant because it meets their quota and it makes everything look right on paper. So somebody winds up getting terrorized because of these things, and this really hurts police relations with the community. I really do not like these raids because they wind up destroying people's lives. They're, as I see it, an archaic concept, because the war on drugs is a complete failure. It was a failure from its implementation in 1970, because when you look at the drug war, you're fighting against basic economics. It runs diametrically opposed to capitalism, because the thing that has people taking drugs and selling drugs is demand. And the reason why people are selling drugs is because people are demanding drugs. And America is the #1 consumer of drugs in the world, illegal drugs.
Correct.
So
largest import and export of drugs is the United States.
So to sit there and say you want to declare war on something when the whole thing is the whole thing is that it's leading to this demand, and the whole thing is your whole approach is let's arrest them and lock them up. And that has not worked in 40, 50 years. I mean, I look at the whole drug war as a complete failure, especially during the crack epidemic, which led to a civil war in the Black community. It's a complete failure, and our approach needs to completely change. I've always said that, we have to deal not with it from a demand side, but not from a supply side, but from a demand side. And if you deal with it from the demand side and deal with it from that approach, maybe you can get some inroads. And if you deal with the psychological issues which lead to people using drugs, but the whole thing is the capitalists don't want to deal with that because that would cut into their profits. And I need to get back on Breonna Taylor, but Breonna Taylor, it was sad to see this young woman lose her life. I mean, and this man is being prosecuted for doing something everybody does, because this is his Second Amendment right to bear arms, and he has a right to defend his home from what he believed to be trespassers. But I really, again, believe we really need to do something about these so-called no-knock raids. These things are outdated. They're archaic. They don't stop drug traffic. And they really are designed to terrorize communities and put fear in people. And this whole drug war concept, again, it's an archaic concept because we lost that war 50 years ago. I mean, back in the 80s, we lost it in the crack epidemic. People buy drugs because they want drugs. And again, it's like prohibition. Nobody wants to admit that they're wrong because Americans have this great flaw. They don't want to admit when they're wrong. They don't want to admit when they made a mistake. And they don't want to admit when something doesn't work. I mean, it took almost a decade of Al Capone and the mob practically destroying America with their gang wars for Americans to realize that prohibition was a failure. And what's even more disturbing is 50 years into the drug war, and no one wants to admit that it's just a failure.
Yeah. Another caveat about the Second Amendment, as they always say, what's the purpose of the Second Amendment? Is to protect yourself from tyranny and from tyrannical forces in government and street thugs. But that's also to protect you from the police, as Ice-T said.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. He did with every citizen who has whether they have a family or not, but if you have a gun in your home, and this is another thing I encourage Black people with the Ahmaud Arbery shootings and the Breonna Taylor's shootings to buy a weapon. Keep a weapon in your house, preferably a shotgun or AR-15, some type of rifle. You need 3: a handgun that you can carry, you need a shotgun, and you need an AR-15 rifle that's there for something like this. And I know there are some people who may not like that because they say the AR-15s are used in some of these mass shootings, but in reality, if you read the FBI statistics, more people are killed even by knives and hammers. That's actually a murder weapon of choice because than they are with an AR-15, although it's used and people say it's scary. It's not an automatic. And truth be told, it's not an automatic weapon. An automatic weapon is illegal in the United States unless you have it's grandfathered in from the I believe it was the 1983 Act that Reagan signed, or a little bit further, but they don't really sell them anymore. And they're very expensive to get if you could. You get
I've read the prices for them, and
you
need special training in order to use those.
Right. Well, I mean, although I'm for having one, but some people, and I'm not saying everyone should have a gun. I think everyone should get training, go to a shooting range, learn how to hold a handgun, use it. I don't know if you have firearms in your home, Shawn, but
I don't have any right now. I'm in New York where it's impossible to get weapons.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I get that with Como, and it's a Democratic state. But you see, I'm in a Republican state. Thank the Lord on that one, just for that. But yeah, that's why we don't have Louisiana. They have no restrictions on guns and how many you can buy or ammo capacity. Of course, if you're going to get a concealed carry permit,
that's from what I see. That the problem isn't the guns. The problem is just the way people are taught. Because in the 50s, we had gun classes in schools, and because we had fathers in the home,
Boy Scouts,
we had no problem training people on how to use guns. But the big problem was we had a breakdown in the family. People want to blame the guns, but it was never the guns. The problem is we have a family problem. I talked about that in the man crisis. How when we had this breakdown in the family and the creation of this beta male, this guy is the problem because he comes from a single parent household. He acts on impulse. He acts on his feelings. And his whole thing is whenever he's upset, he goes to get a gun to hurt people who disagree with him, have a difference of opinion. And because he has no critical thinking skills, he does not know how to problem solve or know how to do things in a constructive fashion. So it's not the gun that's the problem. I talk about that in the man crisis as related to mass shootings in the man crisis. It's these beta males and their whole way they have been raised and their whole approach to life that makes all these problems. Now, everybody thinks it's a gun issue, but no, it is a family issue. But no one wants to talk about that because that holds women accountable for the way they were raised boys for the last 50 years.
Right. Well, I would say it's in general, it's societal decay. This guy, Henson Hahn, who was an immigrant, even said this at a city town hall meeting in Connecticut after the shooting that took place in Newport, where the kids were killed in that school back in 2012. And he talked about it being societal decay because it's not just a breakdown in family. I think it's a breakdown in morals in general. People don't believe in God. People don't believe in that essence anymore, and people don't believe they should be accountable. And yeah, I think that when that happens, then all hell breaks loose, and people will do dastardly things. And also, if you remember, even during World War II, it's been rumored that the Japanese emperor wanted to invade the United States, and it was the Navy Admiral Nasima Atamoto, I believe is his name, if I'm not mistaken. He said that would be a mistake because there would be a rifle in every blade of grass. Basically, talking about I could be getting the quote wrong. People don't get upset with me for doing that, but I'm paraphrasing, but that was the phrase, if I'm not mistaken. There would be a rifle in every blade of grass because they knew that the American people would be armed. You can use it to repel against foreign invasion. So if you're in New York, man, is it even hard to get like a shotgun?
It's hard to get a license. It's hard to get a permit. I mean,
so you need even in your home to keep a gun?
Yeah, and it's like so many hoops, and de Blasio has made it even harder. They have this notion from the 1980s that it's legal gun owners that were the ones that were out here committing all the crimes, and they're thinking that because they have this notion that if we put more restrictions on getting a legal gun, it will discourage criminals from getting guns, not understanding that criminals don't follow the rules in the first place, and the criminal he can get access to guns because he's not following the law, and
that's off the black market.
Yeah, they don't understand that, and you can't explain that to people out here who think that crime, if we do gun control, it will stop the crime. But the whole thing is, what stops crime is one part policing, the other part is the family. So the real thing that really stops crime is the family. If we rebuild the family, you can stop a lot of crime in a lot of communities, because if there's, as I see it, a father in the home and he's teaching his sons and daughters and able to provide for his sons and daughters, that really is the greatest detriment to crime altogether. If you really want to stop crime and violence, you bring that father into the home. And if you look at many of the serial killers, many of the mass shooters, again, they all come from single parent households. So that shows me that the greatest crime deterrent is that father in the home.
Yeah, most definitely. Dad in a home will save you a lot of time to do. So I believe that. Yeah, back even on television in the night up until I would say the mid 90s, we had TV shows that showed, positive male role models, whether you're talking about the Uncle Phil or the Carl Winslow or the Lester Williams or, who else? I have to say even Cliff Huxtable. I don't care who gets mad, but Bill Cosby. Now, of course, I didn't watch the Cosby Show because I didn't have a father. I have a father. My father's always been in my life, but and been married to the same woman, my mother, for over almost 45 years. So I'm grateful for that. But, they were positive role models to us. And, I don't care who gets mad. But, yeah, moving on. Before I go, I wanted to ask you, you really go hard on Meghan Markle and the Prince Harry thing. What issue, if any, do you have an issue with her, or you just feel just don't care?
I have no issue with her, but I just see the paradigm around Prince Harry's, and I just do videos on that with the British accent just as a way to have a little humor. But I have no issue with Meghan Markle. I have no issue with Prince Harry. But when I see this situation, I see a teachable moment for my viewers as related to the whole simp paradigm. And I see a man who doesn't really understand his power as a man, his role as a man, his position as a man. I mean, I see a man who got into a marriage for, as I see it, all the wrong reasons. And right now, he's a man in crisis.
Right.
And that's a mess that I just want to teach regarding what
He's lost.
Yeah. Well, he's lost because he's being led by the woman and he's not leading himself. I mean, I look at Prince Harry and he's buying into her ideas from feminism that, oh, she can go out here and get a job, but you're a part of the royal family. You don't need a job. You had everything being provided for you. All you needed to do was just sit there and follow this man's lead. But because she doesn't want to submit to his authority, she wants to go out here and have this career, a career that already had failed once, because if you look at Meghan Markle's career, it wasn't going anywhere. And she just wants to go back out here and have this career that wasn't going anywhere, hoping to use his name to get jobs. But when I look at things, you know, him being in Tyler Perry's mansion, that's not a good look for him as a man. I mean,
No, it isn't. I agree with that. I think, you know, as a man, as a husband, you're the provider and protector of
yeah,
the family. So you lead, and it looks bad when you don't have a home, when you don't have money. You just gave this up. But I want to just ask you this then, okay? Playing devil's advocate, do you think racism though played a factor in them leaving the royal family because there was a lot of pressure with Meghan Markle being in there?
I believe that the racism had a small part in it, but the whole thing is that there was nothing that she knew what she was getting into, because everybody knows that the royals, they are the first family of white supremacy. So if she walked into the first family of white supremacy expecting it to be integrationist and rainbow, and that was never going to be the case. I mean, the royal family, again, is the first family of white supremacy, and to go in expecting the first family of white supremacy to be this open and diverse thing, that was a completely foolish and delusional notion. I mean, that's something that really showed me that your Meghan Markle didn't understand reality. Everybody knows that England was one of the countries that supported the slave trade, and that family has supported all of those policies. So your Prince Harry, he was just really lost because he really didn't understand his family's role in white supremacy. And she was trying to call herself trying to be a part of this family, which was, again, another foolish notion. So I understand that there was racism, but she should have understood that there was racism. But she thought that she could pass. But when she found out she couldn't get a pass, that's when she wound up getting upset and then wanting to try to come back to America, and wound up bringing him behind her, which made him look even weaker. And he actually has lost face in his own family, because when the man is following the woman and he's staying in another man's home, that is the ultimate position of weakness. That is a position where a man is just in an emasculated position. I mean, she has turned.
He's in a strange world now because he's not in England in the comfort of Buckingham Palace. Yeah.
I mean, he's in Pookie's position. You know, Pookie, he goes to live with his girlfriend. She's got the job. She's taking care of him, and he doesn't know how to do anything. I mean, a man would have understood that, look, if I'm going to go to another country, one, I need to get my own place. Two, I need to have a job lined up. I need to work and build contacts. And those are things you plan a year and a half in advance. But because this guy was running on emotion because his wife couldn't handle the pressures, he left his royal position without critically thinking about how he was going to make a living. Because here is a guy who only has Royal Air Force skills. He has no college degree. He has no business experience. He has no contacts, which is one of the most important things when you're looking for a job. You need to have contacts. And he's going to go he's going to Canada, then he's going to LA, but he has no contacts and no way to set up things. I mean, this is a guy who has millions of dollars, but he has no plan. And that's why I say he's a man in crisis, because a man with male life skills, even with $1 million, he's going to go out here and say, look, when I get here, I'm going to get my own place first. Then I'm going to get my security detail taken care of. And then what we're going to do after that is set up a business space in wherever I'm at so that I can start working on the business. Really, we're going to start building the business before that, so I can have a place to work, have employees, and get stuff taken care of. and we're going to have a plan for what we're going to do, because you have to have a plan for making a living, because that's how you provide for yourself and provide for your family. But when I look at this guy, I see the same thing as a Pookie, the same thing as a Ray Ray. He's living up under the woman, and he's not going to get respect, because people, when they look at him, they see weakness. And when people see weakness, they don't see a man they need to respect or regard.
Yeah. Well, no doubt about that. But, you know, I saw in the article, and we're about to wrap it up, but I saw an article where he was finally in touch with his brother, William, I guess, that they had been talking. So were they even on the outskirts with the family? I mean, I feel like he, and by the way, being that he is a celebrity, being that he's royalty, as she, you know, she's technically a celebrity as well, Megan is, you know, their life, you know, becomes scrutiny for the public. I mean, people will comment on it. That's just part of the business. So some people don't like that aspect, but hey, that's part of it. Just like in politics, everything is fair game. You know, as bad as and cruel as it may be. But I'm wondering what the fallout was. But you know, if your family is worth over what, $1 billion, there's no way I would leave that. But I felt that he just did this on an emotional basis. And, you know, right now living with Tyler Perry, I'm just gonna imagine what that's like. But, you know, he opened up his home to them. But, you know, you would eventually think that they move out to LA, you know, she would find something, and it hasn't transpired as of yet. So, and I don't think they're going to be bringing back Suits. So
She just did not plan this too well.
Yeah, it looks like it. And, you know, the thing is, he'll be fine, but, you know, he might end up divorcing her. I don't wish that, you know, but I don't know.
I think things are going, because he just does not have the life skills to survive out there. I mean, he's just going to fall apart.
Yeah.
You have to have life skills, I mean, to go out to Hollywood. And most of the people who go out there, they in a year, they usually get eaten alive. So you really have to have your life skills on point. I mean, most people who go out to LA at 18, 19 years old back in the day, they had found a place to live. Even if it was living with someone, they found a job, and then sooner or later they started looking for other jobs. And the whole thing is, they were looking to build a life, because you have to have a plan when you go out there, because there's a lot of competition out there. I mean, LA, as I see it, is just as competitive as New York. And if you don't have a plan, you're going to get destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought about moving out to LA, but once, because I wanted to pursue a career in acting and comedy and so forth. And I was at the point where I realized, well, Gavin, if you do this, what contacts do you have out in California? Well, I got cousins I could stay by. Well, maybe not. You know, of course, they may check on you and take care of you, but, you know, you're going to have to get a job, and you're going to have to get, you know, eat in the meantime. You're going to have to, where are you going to work? Where are you going to live? Where, you know, how are you going to get into, if you're going to break in this business, who are you going to talk to? Do you know anyone? And I know it's a hard thing. And I know we got to wrap it up. We keep, you know, it's just random talk. But since I'm thinking about that, this Netflix series, I don't know if you heard of it, since we talked about the gay agenda and so forth, or that's being pushed, there is a TV series called Hollywoodland that I've seen a few episodes on it. And
I watched the whole series.
Oh, you watched the whole series?
I did a whole roast of it on my BitChute. I couldn't put that review on YouTube, because there are those in the alphabet community who would be offended by the commentary I presented, especially regarding the black male character who was just completely emasculated.
Yeah, I noticed you said it's on BitChute.
Yeah, it's a BitChute. I'll leave a link to that video in the chat, but I could not put that video on YouTube, because YouTube, they just, if you make any critique of anybody in the alphabet community,
oh yeah,
they just take, like, I did a video refuting the whole thing about a guy who was a gay Nazi, and how that was completely illogical because Adolf Hitler hated gays, and they flagged that video even though it was something meant to help people understand Adolf Hitler hated homosexuals. And
It was historical, what you were talking about.
yeah, historical fact. And they called it hate speech because they just didn't want to see the truth. I mean, a lot of these alphabet people, they just are so caught up in their feelings, they don't understand that people trying to present facts to you, like Adolf Hitler hating gays, and because when he said his Aryan agenda in Mein Kampf, he said some really hostile things regarding the gay agenda.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, then you already know what I was going with the Hollywood Land. And that's produced by Ryan Murphy, who he is also in the LGBT community, and he is actually considered, I think, the highest paid producer in Hollywood, if I'm not mistaken. He certainly has the busiest schedule because he's got TV shows and deals lined up with different networks like FX, and I know he has this thing with Netflix. This was a multi-million-dollar deal that he signed.
Yeah,
that
I
they
heard take criticism on things. So he was a creator of Glee, and he just have a hard time taking criticism. But that whole show was propaganda. I mean, that whole thing was like glorified fanfic.
What show was that?
He made the show called Glee on Fox that was popular.
Oh, Glee. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
But he can't take criticism. So the whole thing is that how can you be a part of the entertainment industry and you can't take criticism? In this business, you have to have a thick skin. And the whole thing was, if he's just thinking that he can play the alphabet victim, but if you're not making something that's good, then it's not good. And when I watch Hollywood, the whole show was alphabet propaganda, and to the last episodes were so ridiculous. And I don't want to spoil them for you, but they were just pure propaganda. The story made no sense. I mean, the costuming and the cinematography were beautiful on this series, but the storytelling was absolutely ridiculous, and it just turned into fan fiction as I see it, because they did some things with Black history that I found to be quite offensive. I mean, yes, you have this gay Black character in here, but their understanding of Black history was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that agenda is real. I am definitely just going to check it out. I really couldn't. It was hard for me to get into it because it was really explicit and some of it was ridiculous. But I noticed exactly what you were talking about with the Black man in there. And of course, they had it stars. They have the girl from Spider-Man. She was also in Spike Lee's movie Black Klansman. I can't think of her name, but cute girl. Can't think of her name. I'm sorry. They also have the girl Samara Weaving, who plays the daughter of Rob Reiner, who plays the movie studio mogul. Rob Reiner, of course, was Meathead and All in the Family.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but he's known for being extremely liberal and so forth, and a few other people. Of course, they had the guy from the Big Bang Theory, Jim Parsons.
Yeah, his role is he plays a very, very twisted character.
Yeah, I've so far I've seen. So, but I mentioned all of that because it mentions that element of the casting couch that we see that existed even back then in its golden age, and it applied to women and men. And and I think, and I've always thought about this, what you see with the Me Too era, which is basically falling on its face right now because of this Joe Biden election. Joe Biden trying to get the Democratic nomination. This stuff has always been a part of Hollywood. People have known about it, and now we're equating it with rape and so forth. And not to say that rape didn't exist, but if you're going out trying to get a job, that was, and you got it or you didn't get it, I don't equate that as the same. And of course, we see a lot of it's mostly the Black men. Only one white man I know that got really sent to jail for it, which was the Weinstein matter. But, I think of that, and I just was thinking about that because of the type of parties in that one scene we talked about.
Yeah.
I think about, Bill, and this was heterosexual and homosexual parties.
Yeah.
That they had, where they would go up and have sex with each other. And I think, I'm thinking of Bill Cosby. I hate to bring that in, but I thought of something like that was the type of parties he was a part of, at the Playboy Mansion. I can only imagine, being that it was the Playboy Mansion, that's the type of stuff they did.
They were doing that stuff from the inception of Hollywood.
Yeah.
The whole thing is that's why I didn't want anything to do with Hollywood. When I found out the truth about it, I just walked away. I said it's just a place for debauchery and deviancy. It's not a place that the average working man would want to go. I mean, you get this glitzy picture, but it's like I've always said, Hollywood is like a hot dog factory. When you find out how things are made, you don't want anything to do with it ever again.
Yeah. Shawn, I appreciate it again. How can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me through my Facebook. I'll leave a link to that. They can look at my YouTube channel. You can look at my Facebook. And you can
put it in the comment section.
I'm putting it there.
Private chat.
Yeah. Go over to you can get on to my Patreon. That's how you can also reach me, and you can also make a donation to the Patreon, and that helps with me being online and making. Oh, okay. Let's see what's going on here. Here's my Patreon. So. And I put a link to my YouTube channel up in there. And if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct Imprint, you can pick up those books by heading over to Amazon.com. Leave a link to that in the chat. And you can also check out my Twitter as well. See if I can get that to come up. Here's my Twitter. So you can contact me through all of those different areas. And usually I'm on there every day. So you can find me there. And you can pick up my books again on Amazon. I have a great catalog of positive Black fiction and nonfiction, and I'm trying to get the sales up on my 2020 books, like your John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. Okay, let's see. There it is. And ISIS, The Main Event. I'm trying to get 10 sales this month on both of these books. So if all the support will be greatly appreciated. And I want to thank you for having me on the show.
Brother, I want to thank you for coming on the show, Shawn. I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank our viewers, all 4 or 5 or 3 of you, whoever you are. I'm just grateful that you guys came on the show. I would ask also if you could please donate, because it takes a lot of time and effort to come here and conduct an interview, but also to set up a video. Anything that you could give, I have the descriptions in the where you can donate in the description box, from CashApp to PayPal. To also my Patreon as well. I also have Google Pay. So I would ask that you guys contribute in any way to the show if you can, to see more videos like this and more discussion, because this is new Black media. This is what is needed right now in these time and era where someone is going to give it to you straight and not BS you just because you don't want your feelings hurt. We can't do that anymore. Of course, we are respectful to each other. I ask if you have any comments to just leave them. Be respectful. You can agree to disagree with me. You can put a comment. You disagree with me of our topics that we talked about. Whatever you want to do, just be respectful with it. But I'm grateful that you guys were able to come on and show. This is Shawn James, and also check out his book, John Haynes. Check out another book that I'm reading, The Man Crisis, that he has, that is available on Amazon. It's also available through Amazon Kindle as well. Shawn, thank you once again. Do you have one more final thing to say?
No, I think I've said everything I want to say. Just want to try to get support for those books. That's all that's what I'm really trying to do.
All right. And yeah, and hopefully we get Shawn get a gun in his house soon, hopefully.
Maybe with New York, it's going to be hard.
New York, yeah. Well, hopefully change all of that, man, because criminals don't care about the law. That's why they call criminals. They break it. So, but then again, if we didn't have criminals, I would be out of a job too. So it's a double-edged sword. At any rate, guys, that's it for me. This has been another episode of Gavin Richard Presents on my channel, GBoo2786. Peace and blessings. Love y'all. I'm out.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Shawn. Good night, guys.